directly, but I wanted to come on and let you all know. So if you wanted to watch the streaming live, head over to my Facebook page, odettesuterdvm, and I will also be streaming live on YouTube, so you can also watch it there. My YouTube channel is also odettesuterdvm or something like that. In any case, so I'm going to hang up here on Instagram. So just make sure you head over there to also be able to see Holly and Carlton and be part of the conversation. So again, Facebook, odettesuterdvm, and also on YouTube. So you should be able to see the live stream over there. All right, I'll see you over there. Bye. Okay.
You can do a separate Instagram thing later or something. So figure it out.
Yeah, we can always do that some other time. Okay. All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks for your patience here. There are always some technical things, but at least we're not super behind. So we're pulling like a minor little Rodney. I don't know. For those of you guys who are on the Inside Scoop, they also have technical difficulties every time. So it's become a bit of an inside joke. So, anyways, when dealing with Facebook, Instagram, social media in general, there are always a little bit of challenges there. But anyways, I'm so happy to see all of us here, and it's going to be certainly interesting. Hi, everyone. Thanks for taking the time to be here, all of you, and of course also Holly and Carlton, and I'll let you introduce yourselves in just a minute. But I want to set the tone a little bit, because we're going to talk about some subjects that are a little bit tougher in a way, and I know that we are all humans. We all have our vulnerabilities. I will admit that I'm a little bit nervous right now because I want to go, have a really good experience for everyone and get all of your questions answered and your concerns addressed, etc. But I also want to mention that, we are in a time where there's a lot of change going on, and where we have the opportunity to step from a survival-based, fear-based, greed-based, money-based, just really survival way of living, into one that is more about cooperation, communication, love, inclusion, and expansion. And I wanted to just kind of bring that in, because we have a huge opportunity here to do just that, because that's also something that our animals are mirroring to us. They are non-judgmental. They love us unconditionally. They allow us to make mistakes and to struggle and to have whatever is going on in our lives. And we're all on a journey as well, and each of our journeys are going to look different. And the journey of a business owner is going to be very different than the journey of someone who doesn't own a business. And I wanted to open up the space here for all of you to be able to directly communicate with AnimalBiome and Holly and Carlton, so that you can also get the truth, or their side of the story, because there are always three sides, right? But I wanted you to have the opportunity to communicate with them directly about your questions, your concerns, and really hear it from the horse's mouth directly, rather than through whatever is floating around the internet and social media. Because I was really shocked with some of the posts that I saw recently, and that's what prompted me to want to do that, because I've known Holly and Carlton for, like 6 or 7 years now, and I've known them as very heartfelt, kind people who, give a shit. I don't know if you can see it. And I want you to have the opportunity to get to know them as well, and make your get an impression for yourselves. And I'm not here to tell you that you should believe in AnimalBiome or buy AnimalBiome or anything. I just wanted to have a platform here where we can just have an honest and open and kind and compassionate communication so that you can get to know them. Because with some of what's been floating around on the internet, a lot of people may be thinking that, oh no, I'm not doing AnimalBiome because they're in cahoots with Cargill and all of that. But in the end, it may actually be more damaging to the animals who don't get the opportunity of benefiting from all the amazing things that AnimalBiome is doing as well. So again, I'm not trying to sway you one way or another. This is about just putting it out there for you to be able to make choices based on the information that you hear today. And I encourage you to ask questions and post your concerns. I'm going to do my best to follow the thread, which sometimes can be a little challenging. If I don't get to all of them, I will have a look later after we're done with the live. And if there are questions for Holly and Carlton, I will email them and see if I can get an answer from them as well. And in order to be, I want this to be a really honest sort of, space, again, with kindness and compassion. And I want to start with being honest myself. I have known Holly and Carlton from, almost when they started, probably about a year after they started AnimalBiome. And I was so impressed with their company that I invested a little bit of money as well. But I'm probably a very, very minority investor. But nevertheless, I have invested a little bit of money. I use their products. I sell their products. So I make money off of AnimalBiome's products. So that's just full disclosure. And I do not own AnimalBiome. Some people were under the impression that I own AnimalBiome, but I certainly do not. So anyways, I just want to kind of open the floor for you guys to all ask the questions. And first of all, again, thanks so much, Holly and Carlton, for being here and for taking time out of your, I know, very busy schedule. And so if you wouldn't mind introducing yourselves, both of you, and also, what started AnimalBiome, what makes you tick?
Sure. Okay, awesome. I guess I'll go first. So I'm Holly Ganz, and AnimalBiome grew out of research that I was doing at UC Davis on the microbiome of pet cats, and where I found that through this kitty biome project that I had to go to Kickstarter to get funding for, because there wasn't typical academic funding for this kind of research. And I had all these people whose cats had chronic diarrhea, and they were like, please help us. So I really grew out of research and finding that there was a problem that people were really, really upset about. Like, their cats had gone in for a dental, they'd had antibiotics prophylactically, and then they were living with chronic diarrhea. And when I looked at the microbiome test results, which is an academic technique that we use to study the microbiome using sequencing of a DNA marker gene, I found really obvious dysbiosis because these cats were missing important groups of bacteria that are foundational for gut health. So I'm a microbiologist. I did my PhD at UC Davis. I postdoced at UC Berkeley before going back to the Davis Vet School to do research on the animal microbiome. And starting the Kitty Biome project really led me to start talking to people about their pets. And I found that to be really engaging. And I left my job. I worked for several years with no salary in order to help people. And, we are still not profitable. Carlton can speak to the business, right? But it's a risk that you take. I view this very much as a labor of love. And every day we have people tell us that we saved their pet's life. So I'm not worried about, we get lots of positive reinforcement. So we believe in transparency. I came from open science, and part of why we put, some of our partnerships on our website is because we believe in transparency. And so we just, I think, need people to know what those relationships are and why we have them.
Right.
Yeah, we'll go into that a little bit more because I'm curious myself. I I browsed through them again this morning to see, you know, what it is that you're working with them. So
sure, yeah, happy to get into that. So I'm Carlton Osborne. I'm CEO and co-founder of AnimalBiome, and Holly and I are married. In case you didn't know that already. So my background is I started my career as a lawyer. I went to Penn undergrad and then Stanford for law school. And I was working with entrepreneurs, helping them from the legal side to get going. I realized I wanted to be one of the clients. So I went in-house at one of my clients. It's well over 20 years ago at this point. And AnimalBiome was my fifth startup. My other startups were in software primarily, or in digital photography. And like, what makes us tick? So we AnimalBiome for me really got its genesis when we had our dog Yuki, sort of a herding dog that ruled our lives. And we were sort of uneducated pet parents and fed her food that we now know was not good for her.
What they recommend at the pet store.
Exactly. And she was like 13 years old and basically came down with hemorrhagic gastroenteritis, which is bloody diarrhea. And we got her into the emergency room. We were very, very worried we were going to lose her. And they stabilized her with fluids and antibiotics, which was great. But she ended up being one of those pets on the medical merry-go-round, where every 2 to 4 weeks she was having blowout diarrhea. And it was, it's just heartbreaking, because like you really want to do your best. You get educated, you try different things, and nothing was working. And at the time, Holly was doing research in Southern Africa, looking at the soil microbiome and looking at sort of this bacteria, anthracis, that was going from the animals to the soil and back to animals. And she realized that the tools that she was using to study the soil microbiome could be used to help pets like Yuki. So she left her position at Berkeley and took the position at the UC Davis Vet School. And Yuki was dog patient 0 for our fecal transplant capsules. And she went from, this fairly fragile state to having perfect poops. And she really, she ultimately died of cancer, but she had a healthy gut until she died at the age of 17.
And she never had hemorrhagic gastroenteritis again.
Yeah. And so, I don't come from the animal health space, although I guess I've been in it now 7 years. But what I saw was an opportunity to help other pets like Yuki. And, our early customers, we were the only thing that worked. And so, so really we are focused on.
I was just gonna add, I gave the pills away for a year, and then people were begging me for them. And then Carlton was like, you have to charge something, because it's not sustainable, right, at all. So building a business is there's a lot of learnings for sure.
Yeah. And so, we have 2 dogs. We are basically dedicated our lives to improving animal health. And, in terms of a business, so we started with microbiome testing, and Holly developed the first fecal transplant capsule that was stable at room temperature. We're the first company to do that in the US, if not the world, in human, pet, or any field. And but the reason why Holly developed that fecal transplant capsule is because she knew that there were things that healthy pets had, i.e. bacteria, that could be transmitted in their poop to sick pets. But her vision early on was to ultimately figure out what it is in the poop, isolate it, and develop products that are just what the pets need. And in order to do that, it's going to take tens of millions of dollars of investment to create a whole new, essentially, category of product. And so, we're doing fecal transplant capsules is a labor of love. Like, literally, we have drivers driving around the Bay Area 5 days a week, collecting from about 100 different donors. And it's not easy.
We're constantly having to recruit.
Yeah.
They don't stay healthy forever.
Yeah, we'll happy to talk more about the donors later. But ultimately, our vision is to create products sort of based on fecal transplants, but it's going to take a lot of investment in technology to do that. And so we brought in outside investors. We have, we started with us writing our own checks to make payroll. And then we brought in friends and family, and then we brought in smaller VCs. And then in 2021, we took an investment from Cargill Incorporated. And questions. And so Cargill was sort of an unexpected source of funding for us. We didn't really even know that they were fully in the pet space, but what they are they're very into production animals. And we actually have a whole microbiome testing service that they do for production animals. And that's really was the source of their interest in us. And they're also interested in these next generation probiotics based on what we're finding in the fecal transplants. And so they're making a huge investment. They have made a huge investment in us to really see if we can be successful in creating that next generation product. Because, okay.
But they don't own us.
Yeah, they don't own us. So the way, in case you don't understand how startups work, like venture-backed startups. So early on, Holly owned all of the stock. And then as you take investment, you sell a little bit of the stock and you own a little bit less and your investors own some. But today, Cargill is a significant shareholder in AnimalBiome, but they do not own a majority share. They don't control what we do. We are an independent small business founded by women and people of color, and that's something we're really proud of. And so it is sort of disappointing when people make claims about what they think they know, but they don't really know. And so I just want to clarify that.
Yeah. Thank you for clarifying, because those are always the questions, and certainly I've had my own share of questions. Why Cargill, and I find that when we have to look at something with an open mind, because if we already go in with judgment, there's no way of being able to view something. And obviously with Cargill, they're not exactly known for being sustainable and following human rights and all that good stuff. So I guess, what do you see is happening with you working with Cargill? Do you feel like you have some influence on how they're maybe continuing their business practices? Because I always say it's not the veterinarians who are going to change veterinary medicine. It's the people who are going to change veterinary medicine. And same with the bigger companies who are not doing great in this world. It's not them who are going to make the change from within. It's going to be the pressure from the outside that is going to create change. So do you feel like you have some input in creating that pressure and helping with the change so that they can do better?
So on the projects we work together on with Cargill, yes, we have a lot of influence on that. Cargill is a very big company. I think they have like 170,000 employees and do over $120 billion of revenue. So little AnimalBiome does not have a lot of influence on Cargill writ large, if you will. But Holly, I thought it might be good for you to talk about some of the people that we've met within Cargill and what impressed us about what they do.
Yeah, yes, we're happy to speak to that. I mean, I don't think I'm fully aware of all of the political things relating to Cargill, but but just to focus on what we work on with them. They've been actually making a lot of investments in the human health supplement space. So what you may think of as Cargill is like the big food agribusiness, but they've actually, they purchased Diamond V. They've made a number of acquisitions in human health. And so they've become very interested in the supplements world. And I think we could probably do a whole nother session on digging into the different big supplements companies and who owns them and what's behind them, because I think there's probably a lot there that I don't know at this point, but I'm sure that this community is interested in these things. There's a lot to dig in on some of that. So I've been working with a team of scientists at Cargill. They're almost all women. They're really smart women. It's been really wonderful to interact with this amazing team of people. And, we're really focused on creating, the first one is a microbial cocktail for cats. Honestly, nobody wants to invest anything in creating probiotics for cats or any product for cats. So like the fact that they wanted to work on cats I was very pleasantly surprised, honestly.
Yeah, they brought that to us. They were like, the first product needs to be cats. They're like,
oh, wow.
Yeah, cats, like 10% of the money for research goes to cats, right? Compared to dogs.
Mm.
And
I didn't know that. That's interesting and sad.
Yeah, it is. And then the other companion animals were much less though, right? Like,
pigs. I mean, I remember in vet school, we had one book on pig health and that was it.
Yeah.
So we're creating this cocktail for cats, and it's slow. It's gonna take a long time. We're really eager to have it.
Explain what a cocktail is.
Oh yeah. So I mean, there's different ways of describing it. It's basically like we're creating a new probiotic. The idea is to have 4 strains of bacteria in it, and these are anaerobic bacteria that are important for gut health that are being killed off by antibiotic exposure, and they're hard to grow. Like we have in our lab, we've built our own microbial discovery lab. We've isolated thousands of different bacteria, and we're working on how do we grow them. And the reason we want to do this is not because we think necessarily we can replace a fecal transplant, right? Like we know that is something special that's really valuable, but we cannot provide fecal transplant material to all the veterinarians in the United States. There's too many of them. There's too many pets. And so if we want to help as many pets as we can, we need something that we can more easily scale up, right? So and save the fecal transplant material, right, for those most severe cases where it's needed most. But we know that, we've been doing a bunch of work looking at how many of the medications that are commonly used in veterinary medicine are killing off good bacteria in the gut. And we are isolating them, growing them in the lab with the idea that the probiotics that we're going to make will actually be the ones that are important for gut health. And I think what people don't realize is a lot of the probiotics on the market right now are yogurt bacteria, soil bacteria, which they're perfectly fine, can be helpful, but they're not the ones that are being killed by antibiotics. They're not the ones that are so foundational for animal health.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So also, I just wanted to sort of talk about our funding journey a little bit and like how we ended up choosing Cargill as our funding partner. So one of the things that we learned, so coming from outside of animal health, that is pretty shocking, is that traditional investors in pharma, so therapeutics, don't invest in pet. They invest in human. And if there's something for pet that can come out of the human investment, that's great. Traditional investors in technology may invest in pet, but they don't invest in hardcore new life science technology. They find it very intimidating. And so we ended up in this intersection of human health where like the only people making these investments today are Elanco, Zoetis, Merck. And they tend to focus on, parasitides and
they want blockbuster drugs.
Yeah. And
small molecules, right?
Yeah. And
not natural.
They haven't been focusing on the microbiome. They really still aren't. And there are companies doing what we're doing in humans in terms of like developing these next generation probiotics. There are companies doing what we're doing in production animals. But we're the only ones doing this in pet. And so, why we chose Cargill was a little bit of this intersection between what we needed, who was invested, and also the fact that like Cargill is making huge investments. So one of the things that really struck me in our early conversations with Cargill was they said, okay, we are traditionally a nutrition company. We make ingredients that feed people. And they're on this sort of like multi-decade journey to become more of a health company. So not just think about what are the ingredients that people need to survive, but what are the ingredients that people need to thrive? And so with the Diamond V acquisition 5 or 6 years ago, and a number of others, they're really trying to make health a much bigger focus of the overall company. They've been around 100, 110 years. They're like a aircraft carrier. They're not going to turn on a dime. But I did really appreciate their vision for where they wanted to go. And I felt like a company that's been around for that long would be a lot more patient, as we would take, I mean, we've been working on these projects now 3 years, the next generation probiotics. And it's going to take us another 3 years before we really have a cocktail that we can bring to market. And so I wanted a partner that could be patient in that way.
Also, it took, 3 or 4 years for us to get the investment to start that project. It's what I wanted from the beginning. But what Carlton mentioned, I mean, the only people who would invest in our company to do that early on wanted us to do it for humans. And as you know, as animal health people, like, we're like, no, you can't pay me to work on humans. Not because I don't love people, but I want to work on the animals, right? That's the passion.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what I'm hearing too is like you're taking huge risks with what you're doing. And, you know, if I had to create a company like you have, I would, you know, poop my pants many times over, because for one, I don't know much about business or any of that. And I mean, it's really hugely risky, and I certainly applaud you for that. And again, you know, we have to sort of look at things on a gray scale, you know, because black and white is not really serving, because then there can't be anything else but that. So I really appreciate you explaining, you know, how you're working with Cargill and why you chose them and so on. And again, we're in a big process of change on this planet. And I think that even these big ships, as you said, they will take a little bit of time to slow down and start to move in the other direction. And so, yeah, I mean, you guys who are listening, you make up your own minds about what you think about it. But I think it's quite amazing, the reach that you're creating and the communication, because I think we also need to bridge some gaps. You know, there are big gaps. And, you know, another company that you're working with is Hills. So maybe you could share a little bit about what's going on there, because I think that, you know, if we look a little bit into the underbelly of companies, we actually get to see a different version than what is being broadcasted. And believe me, I'm not a big fan of Hills. You know, I don't recommend that, you know, the food that they offer and all of that. But I remember you and I talked a little bit, Holly, at the AHVMA conference that was just happening a few weeks ago. And I was just so impressed of, you know, how you're sort of helping to sort of bridge that gap, so that, you know, we can all kind of turn into a better direction all together, because again, we have to do it together.
Yeah. I mean, so Hills, I think, you know, when I started this journey, I didn't know anybody in the industry, right? I was a scientist. I've said, look, people I've met at some of these pet food companies are passionate scientists who are really trying to improve animal health. And I think it's really important to remember that, right? So you may not like Hill's products, but the people who work there are very committed, and they do a lot of research. And the thing that I've been impressed with is their GI biome diet is a really great alternative to antibiotics. I would recommend any veterinarian reach for that before they send somebody home with metronidazole. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it actually, we know it does improve microbiome composition of the bacteria in the gut. And it has a lot of really interesting fibers in it. It has really nice fiber blend. And so when they reached out to us to do a study, all we're doing right now is 2 studies for them. And one with this GI microbiome diet, and then the other is a diet that they have to deal with obesity, which is also, I think, a really important, you know, concern for animal health. Like 60% of the cats and dogs in the US are overweight or obese. And so I think, even though I feed my pets, right, we feed them raw and fresh food. There are some arguments for some of these packaged diets. I mean, and the point that I was making with Odette when we saw each other in San Diego a few weeks ago was we want to help all the pets, right? And we know that not everybody's can afford to feed the way we feed or wants to feed the way we feed. And we want them all to have the best gut health possible. And we want companies to do research and understand the implications of their products. And both, we've been doing studies for Cargill as well, actually testing if, one of their products is beneficial for a specific for skin health for cats and dogs. And if so, at what dosage? And that kind of research is so critical. We want, just like veterinary science should be, right, evidence-based medicine. We want that with the supplements and food products that we feed our pets.
And so initially back in 2017, 2018, Holly started doing like projects for some of these food and supplement companies just to have some revenue to keep the lights on, because she was giving away the FMT capsules. She had to make some revenue somewhere to keep the lights on. And but what we realized was that back then in particular, that most companies, if most pet food companies, even if they knew what the microbiome was, even if they had microbiome researchers on staff, they actually hadn't done very many studies to understand how their products affected the microbiome. And, Holly's a scientist. I'm one by association, if you will. But part of what she's done is that she's built this team of amazing scientists that come from outside of pet nutrition and animal health. They come from academia, UC Davis and Berkeley and other places. And what we realized was that the skills that Holly's team had could help these companies better understand how their products perform in actual pets in terms of the gut microbiome. And what we learned sort of the hard way was that most of them actually didn't really understand how to study the microbiome. And at this point, we've done over 45 studies with pet food companies and pet supplement companies. And we found that because of budget, we were asked to study data from studies that were not well designed. And so Holly's team wrote a paper and basically got it published in an academic journal, best practices in doing microbiome studies in pet food. And now, like, folks in the industry look to that paper to think about how to design their studies. And so we worked with Hills and others, really because if we want to help every pet live a healthier life, then all the food on the market needs to be better. Not just the food that I feed my dog. Right. It needs to be all the food. And I will say that there are some pet food companies that believe in research more than others. But one of the disappointing things is that it takes a lot of money to do good research. And most smaller pet food companies don't have the resources to do studies. Like we've basically worked on projects with small pet food companies for free because they just don't have the money to really field the study. And so we'll do a study with big pet food company A so that we can support small pet food company Z. And we've been asked to do studies comparing raw to kibble, but none of the raw companies have been willing to actually fund that study. And so
yeah, we used to do that with Richard Patton. He just wanted to know, but it was self-funded.
Yeah. And so I know there's a lot of reasons that the people in the community we live in that are raw feeders and fresh food feeders sort of don't like kibble. But I think the thing that has surprised me is that they do invest in research. The larger companies do. They do care about animal health. And I think we're uniquely positioned to help them get data to improve their products. Like we did do a study comparing fresh to kibble, and that did prompt one of the large pet food companies to like further support a fresh food line they had. And so, without data, you're not going to get these large companies to really change. And I think we're uniquely positioned to help them get that data.
Yeah. And I think it's you're also in a unique position as a scientist where you don't really care about the result. You're just looking at the result in a neutral sort of way, and then you're just passing on that information to the company. So you're not really invested in the result being either one way or another. At least that's kind of the feeling I got when I spoke with you. And that's really what a true scientist is. A true scientist just looks at the data, and then, I mean, obviously we all have our biases and all of that, but, a true scientist will just basically show it as it is, and then, take it from there. And I know you've also done some studies with more natural companies where the results did not really show up the way that health food, that healthy company wanted it to show, and there was some disappointment. So I know I've known you as being very honest in that regard, and just these are the results, they don't lie.
Yeah, I mean, what we choose to work on, what gets funded, those are all things that our biases and our interest affect. But like once there's data for a study, Holly seems sort of brutal. Like it's just the facts, man.
Yeah. Well, but I mean that's what it takes, and I appreciate that about you. And I mean, just speaking with you, it just warm, or hearing what you're saying just warms my heart. And that's what we all need, is we need to be more neutral about things in general, and be open to including everything, and sort of let go of that fight and that resistance that we're all in, and starting to really be more inclusive, because that's the only way that we can really change as a people. And we do need to, because when we look out, what we've done to this world, to our animals and everything, it's really important that we all start to kind of pull that load and start changing things. And you're in a unique position as scientists to start to change that from a different perspective. Pet parents obviously are working on it by voting with their money, but you're then bringing a different perspective to it that may then change bigger companies and how they do things. And maybe they're never going to be as perfect as we'd like them to be, but at least it's moving in a better direction. And we really need to have that movement happening on a bigger scale, because we are kind of at a period of time where, unless we don't change right now, we're not going to be making it for that much longer. I mean, I think we only have a few generations worth of topsoil left on this planet, and everybody's getting sicker and sicker, and so we do need to change. And I really, for one, I'm so grateful for all of the things that you're doing, and that you're I mean, you've opened me up in some way, because I've seen you in the past going to meetings and things like that with investors and such, and I'm like, why would they invest? Take investments from these people? So I had to kind of get out of my own rigidity, which I definitely have that as well. But yeah, it's just it opens us up, it opens up hearts and creates more inclusion, and that's really important. And so thank you so much for all the things that you're doing, and for putting your hearts and souls into it, and just to show a little bit more of what you're doing. You came up with a new product with the fish, so maybe you could chat about that for a second as well.
So I mean, I think we haven't highlighted maybe enough. We also have environmental values, and I would say in terms of like the food business, I would look to everybody to push on the sourcing for the food. I think that's the bigger problem than like the form factor of kibble, for example. It's really because it's convenient and it's not going to go anywhere. But you could source better. So for our fish bits, so we wanted to have a way to recommend additional protein be added to a diet, because all of us have different, like, yes, there's like a nutritionally balanced diet, right? But then some of us might need more carbs or more fat or more protein or more fiber than someone else. And some of it we think now is based on our microbiome composition. But of course, it could also be just like, I'm genetically different too than you are. And maybe, so when we look at the microbiome signal, sometimes we see it looks like the bacteria that really benefit from protein in the diet need to come up a bit. And so we recommend adding more protein. And there are different ways of doing it. But we wanted to have like a fish powder that was a sort of convenient way to add some more protein to the diet. And we had met a small company who's local to us. They're based out of Berkeley. And did we just drop? No.
Sorry, that was me.
Anyway, they're sourcing fish that are invasive species that are, destroying the freshwater fish communities. And this one is a plecostomus. They call it the devilfish. It comes from the aquarium industry. We used to have one in our fish tank for years.
And they grow to be like...
They're armored catfish.
This big. They can be really huge.
Yeah. And so basically this company is like basically hires fishermen to go and fish these invasive species. And then they have a process for, drying them. And then we make it into fish bits. And so it's been, it's going to be coming back on our website the next week or so.
Yeah. We sold out of the first batch and we're now waiting for our second batch.
And it's all in compostable bags. It's very much, and the labels are compostable as well. And we're really working on sustainable packaging as much as possible.
Yeah. And I did want to talk about like just how we are very community oriented. And one of the communities we're in is the community of pet care or animal health startups, right? And one of the things we realized was out of our testing, we make two basic recommendations. One is to increase protein. The other is to increase fiber. And we met Kelly and Billy at Green Juju and really felt like their freeze-dried product was a great way of sort of addressing
vegetables,
addressing the increased fiber recommendation. So we've started offering that on our site. And so we mentioned Mike at Pezzy Pets and the product we made with him. And then also we're also friendly with the folks over at Teef, another Primal Health, another young startup company. We offer their product on our site. And so when we see products that we think will improve animal health, we want to expose them to our customer base and help these other companies grow as well. And so that's part of the community we're building.
Yeah, and we've done a couple studies with insect-based protein companies. So Jiminy's in Berkeley, we published a paper with Ann Carlson, the founder of Jiminy's, and where she had to show that like cricket protein is digestible by dogs, because previously insects were considered like contaminants in food. And we've worked with another small insect-based pet food company in the East Coast too. Yeah,
and that's actually a great example of I think. I mean, I don't know how this community thinks about insect protein, but I think that what Ann's doing at Jiminy's is like the point of the spear to make insect protein one of the protein pillars within pet food. And I think I admire what she's doing, and I think she gets a little frustrated now that some of the larger pet food companies are copying her. But that's really about changing the industry, and supporting Ann and doing that, I think, helps change the industry.
Yeah, and it's much more sustainable, right?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
So it looks like you get some questions. Anything?
Yeah, I'm getting
any
questions here. Yeah, so one of the comments was the problem with big known companies arises when they guide the scientists to prove their junk foods are for people or pets kind of manipulating to make more money because they know they are backed by science. I think you sort of addressed that already, but in the end,
we do our studies blind. So right, we have controls and we analyze the data blind. So we're not trying to reaffirm what they say. We're actually asking questions, looking at the data, like you said.
And I think part of what that comment's getting to is this concern that, okay, so they do a study and it's just a marketing effort, right? And I will say that there are a number of large pet food companies that we've worked with where the results did not come back the way they wanted. But they actually are taking that data back to think about how to improve their product. And so,
actually, they were like, knowledge is power.
Yeah, exactly. Now, it probably will take them 4 years or so to take that data back through their development pipeline. But they didn't shy. They were like, one of the scientists were like, I sort of expected this. And but they like, data is power, so they can't move as fast as like a small company, but I think they will ultimately improve their product.
Yeah. I mean, on that note, I want to take us a little bit into a different context, because we all see what we see through our lenses, and I'm much more of a cup half full than cup half empty sort of person. And so I think that, and that may be one of my faults, I don't know, but if I always try to see the best in people, in life, and even in drugs, because I used to be a veterinarian who's like, no, you cannot use drugs, that's awful, drugs are bad. No. And then I had my own issues with health, where I was in so much pain that I just needed something because it was just unbearable. So I had to switch. And I think that, we need to sort of, based on that comment, maybe also give a little bit of the benefit of the doubts, that we can't just put all scientists or all food manufacturers or, everybody in the same pot, because for one, every company is made of so many different people who, most of them, if you actually get to know them, you would like them. We may not want to necessarily hang out with them a whole lot, but we would find something in common, and we would find that they actually have a heart, and that they do care. And certainly there are a handful, certain people who probably don't really care, and they're like, yeah, it's all about money and such. But I don't know that a company could even survive on that if we just want to make money.
Short term, they can, but I do think that if they want to build something sustainable, it takes more than that. Your comment reminded me that we actually had this delegation of 10 pet food CEOs from China come and visit our labs back in March. They were on the way back from Global Pet to China, and they asked to come by and see our labs. And we had this interesting moment where they were all putting probiotics in their food. And we were like, well, because this gets to the marketing question versus the science, right? And we told them that, like, based on our research,
they do nothing.
They do nothing. And they were like, but we have to put it in because everyone else is doing it. And but at the same time, they were complaining at how expensive it was. And we said, well, wouldn't you rather spend money on something that's going to work or have some positive outcome and talk to that versus just put it in, spend money on something that, now that we're telling you, now know doesn't provide any benefit. And I have to say, it was a bit of a oh shit moment for them, because they had never really thought about it from that perspective. And I do think that, as a business person, I will talk to this. I do think that is one of the dangers in having companies run by people who only think about the business side of things. And we had this sort of existential issue with someone that joined our team about a year ago, where actually we're arguing, and he said, well, we're a consumer products company. And I was like, no, we're an animal health company. And in the end, like, if you're a consumer products company, you're going to innovate to new products that sell. If you're an animal health company, you're going to focus on products that make a difference. And I do think that, like, if you're going to be a business person in the animal health space, you need to understand that is a fundamental difference. It's very much more mission driven than like brand driven. And I mean, I think there's truth in that comment, because a lot of times companies don't quite fully understand, are they an animal health company or a consumer products company?
I would agree with you also, Odette, that like you need to be charitable in your views of other people and other companies when you don't know them, right? Like, because they are made up of people, and the vast majority of those people are trying to do good. And I do think the companies that are just in it for the money they aren't going to last.
Yeah,
because they're not going to do things the right way. Like, they're not going to make sure everything's safe. If they really just care about money, they're not going to do the right testing.
Yeah. Well, and in the end, even on a smaller scale, each individual cares about money, because we can't live without money. So in a way, companies are maybe showing some dysfunction that we experience in our own very personal lives as well. Because in the end, I mean, as a veterinarian, there's still sort of that sense out there that because we're veterinarians and we care so much about animals, we should give away things for free. Right? But then if you were to talk to someone who works in the post office, for example, and we would tell them, well, you should do this for free, they would say, are you nuts? So I think we look at the bigger companies, but we also have to look at our own our own personal lives and what drives us, and companies are driven by a fear of survival on some level, because if you can't bring in revenue and money, you can't function, and I know that as a veterinarian, if I don't bring in money, I have to close my doors. I can't do what I'm doing. And it's the same, in our very own personal lives. So,
Darwin.
But the thing is that with some of the bigger companies, we don't really know all the things that are going into it to be able to make it work. And so it's a bit more easy to judge, because we don't really know, I mean, I don't know all the things that you do. And, I didn't know that you guys barely make any money yourselves because you have, and that you need, millions of investments. I mean, that makes me like a speck on your investor scale. I'm probably not even visible on that. So yeah, I think we just have to have a little bit more compassion and allowance, because we're all on this journey of learning and exploring, and we're all in the same boat, and so if we can all row together, I think we're going to have a much better and easier time. But I do want to kind of switch gears just a little bit, because a lot of what I've also heard, and thank you all of you who have posted comments. To be honest with you, I've not been able to keep up and listening to Carlton and Holly at the same time. So I will definitely go over them, once we're done here, because I so appreciate you all posting. It's just I don't quite have the brain capacity to look at everything and multitask and be present at the same time. So anyways, I wanted to switch gear a little bit, because I know that, from some people who have commented, based on when I put out the newsletter and the post, is that they've not really seen the results that they hoped they would see with, the fecal capsules. And maybe also going back a little bit, knowing what the test results mean, what to do with the test results. Is it worth testing? maybe we should start with that first, with the testing, because that's what we do first, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, well, we've always been sort of flexible for people about that. Not everybody wants to pay for testing, and we understand that, like, we all have limited budgets. I find the testing to be very valuable. I think that it gives you a reference point so that you can see where your cat or dog was today. And then when you make changes to the diet, or if you add in supplements, you do a fecal transplant, you can see if there's a microbiome response there. Of course, the clinical signs, right, the symptoms are the primary response that you want to look at. But if they're missing core groups of good bacteria, then it's like a fecal transplant's a very obvious thing that you should consider. But they don't always, it's complicated. The response can be very subtle. And some of it is that the immune system of the cat or dog can be killing off the good bacteria that are in the fecal transplant. So we can't predict that. But we do learn something from doing the testing before and after and seeing what kind of shift we do see. And it can help guide sort of better approaches. I mean, we're not making a lot of money on the testing. I'm not promoting it as a money-making thing for us. I find it useful, and a number of the veterinarians who work with us do as well. But, we know that people have limited budgets, and so, it's perfectly fine to just take a trial and error approach, which is what we do a lot for ourselves, right, with our health, and just see what works. And that's a valid approach as well.
Yeah. I wanted to just sort of also go back to fecal transplant capsules not working. So they are not magic. Okay. And when we did our initial study back in 2017, it was 112 cats and dogs with IBD or suspected IBD. And 80% showed an improvement in their clinical signs when they took the capsules twice a day for 25 days. That means, so that's great. I mean, that's a huge success, but that means 1 in 5 of the participants saw no improvement in their symptoms.
Or actually goes worse.
Or yeah. And so I do want to just make it clear that the fecal transplant capsules are not magic. They are better than a lot of the other solutions out there, but it's not 100%. Okay. And then
it can be very disappointing when it seems like 80% right succeed and your dog isn't in that group, right? I mean, and you've tried everything else.
Yeah. And so then, because Holly's team likes to look at the problems, after that study, we looked at the ones that didn't improve, and we also looked at the ones that regressed after they stopped taking the capsules. And there's really one thing that we found that was just a way bigger influence than we expected. And that was the amount of E. coli in a pet's microbiome. And so if a pet had high E. coli, sometimes the FMT didn't respond at all. They didn't respond to the FMT at all. Or sometimes they'd respond, but then once they stopped taking the capsules, the symptoms would come back. And so to me, the value of doing the test is you start to understand which population your pet is in before they do the fecal transplant. And so I think a lot of times, and what we have found, because E. coli is a normal resident of the gut microbiome of cats and dogs, that the fecal transplant doesn't always knock it down permanently. And so that's why we developed our Gut Maintenance Plus product that has the bacteriophage that targets E. coli. And so sometimes by doing the test ahead of time, you're able to know that, okay, we should do the fecal transplant plus the bacteriophage that targets E. coli. Sorry, our dog is going crazy.
Yeah. We're all animal people here. So
Exactly. And so without the testing, and you do the fecal transplant and it doesn't work, we don't really know why it didn't work. We have nothing really to go on. And so part of, I think, Holly's vision in coming up with the testing was to see if we could go from a pure trial and error type of approach to supplements to test, have a better roadmap, and then ultimately lead to better outcomes. And And so I can say that anecdotally, I know it leads to better outcomes, but we need to do some more science to really provide evidence of that.
Mhm.
But I do know if you don't do the testing and you do the fecal transplant and it doesn't work or you regress, we're at a bit of a loss as to what we should suggest to try next. And so that's, to me, that's the value of the testing.
And I
Mhm.
should add in like the use of S-Boulardii, which is in both our GMP and our SPU product, right, has been shown in hundreds of studies to help resolve diarrhea. Much better alternative to metronidazole.
Mhm. Yeah.
And that's what led us to create our first products with it. It supports the fecal transplant. It doesn't, though, that yeast does not seem to compete with beneficial bacteria in FFP, whereas bacterial probiotics do. And then we have this bacteriophage cocktail, Pre4 Pro. We've actually have 2 more phages that we've isolated that can help address a number of E. coli that product doesn't yet. And we're looking to have that available in the next year as well.
Can I just dive into that a little? So like, we're constantly looking at ways to improve our products. And one of the things we've seen is that sometimes pets with high E. coli are not responding to our Gut Maintenance Plus product. And Holly's team basically was able to identify 8 pathogenic E. coli that the current phage cocktail does not address. And so that's how we've gone about discovering these 2 new phages that do address those. But, it's a little bit of like, you have a product, it works, but it doesn't work all the time. You think about how to continuously improve it. And so that's where we are with that one.
Yeah, and that sort of brings me to a concern that I've heard. You're doing the testing and then you're selling products based on that. So, there's a bit of a conflict of interest, but at the same time, you would have to have someone do the testing so that you can improve the products at the same time. So I see this working really well together, but I can also understand what people are thinking. But with the testing, I know that you're also collecting so much data. I don't know how many tests you do a year, but you're collecting data that I'm sure you're going to eventually mine into more information. And I know last year you came out with the gut report. What do you call it again? State of the gut report. And I know, Carlton, you mentioned something about the next one coming out. I haven't seen it yet, but I don't know if I missed it or what.
It's coming.
It'll be in a couple, I think 3 weeks is our first edition of it. So,
So when I first started the testing, I wanted, it's true, I wanted it to be independent of the product recommendations. And we actually told people to go to Amazon and buy other people's products. And we did that for a couple of years. It's not a really great way to build a business, for one thing. And 2, also, I don't actually know that those companies are doing the right testing of their products.
Yeah.
Right. And what ingredients they put into those products.
Yeah. I'll be really transparent here. So early on, we discovered the E. coli problem via our testing. And we realized that there was a product out there that had this bacteriophage cocktail in it. And so that was Dr. Tobias's, I forget what the name of the
Pre4 Pro.
Pre4 Pro is the name of the ingredient. I can't remember what Dr. Tobias called their product. And it was a product that they came out for the human market. And so for many years, we were just recommending that people would go buy that product.
It was dosed for humans.
The problem was it was dosed for humans, not for cats and dogs. And it had ingredients that we weren't sure were as sourced as well as they should be. They weren't domestically sourced. They weren't as we in the industry you call it a clean label. The label wasn't as clean. So we started making our own version that our own product that had Pre4 Pro in it, and we think it's better. It has ingredients that the Dr. Tobias product didn't have, but I will say that, as a business person, it's a little hard to see, but when people call in for consultations, our folks will recommend products that we don't sell all the time. But besides the fecal transplant product, the products we've added because we think that we bring something unique and different to the market. And like our S-Boulardii product, like Holly said, S-Boulardii has been around for 100 years. And for some unknown reason, it's not as popular an ingredient in supplements as it should be.
Mm-hmm.
in pet supplements as it should be. But then we realized that the biggest suppliers of Espillardii had dubious sourcing sort of practices. And so we started getting uncomfortable telling people to just go buy something on Amazon because we weren't really clear. It wasn't really, they weren't being transparent in their sourcing. And so we developed our Espillardii product, which is, I'll admit, somewhat expensive, but it's because it's only 2 ingredients, no inactive ingredients, and it's sourced in North America. Mm-hmm. And if you go out and you compare it to other sources of Espillardii, it's going to be more expensive. Mm-hmm. But I do think it's a better product.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so, this test and treat model is it's something we struggled with initially, but in the end, we decided that if we could provide better products and that were recommended out of the test, mm-hmm. that was better for our customers.
Mm-hmm. And actually, our customers asked for it.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't really want us to send them to Amazon to buy some other companies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, in the end, I always recommend that people do their research, into different companies and find out, how do they make things, and then decide based on that. So, they can do the test with you and then get fecal capsules from somewhere else, I mean, whatever they feel most comfortable with. I mean, there's no obligation. I mean, you're just making a recommendation in that sense. But there's definitely also the question out there about, the donors and donors being raw fed and donors being kibble fed. So if we could maybe dive into that a little bit, how do you pick donors? What are the criteria for a donor to become a donor? So what's your process there?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so we screen donors. The first things that we look for are that they have no health condition and that they take no medications. Lots of people tell us that their pet's healthy, but then it turns out they're taking daily medication for like diabetes or something. Mm-hmm. So a lot of learnings about that people don't know what healthy is, right? Mm-hmm. And so, but then we test for parasites and pathogens. We test for microbiome composition. We find out what they are feeding. We do have a range of diets that our donors are on. I just want to say that there are some kibbles, like a lot of our donors are on like open farm. There's a couple other opportunities, where there is good sourcing for humanely raised animals and that are ecologically sustainable approaches. So it's not the form factor exactly that is the thing. I think it's all about the company who's making the food and and where they're sourcing their ingredients that matters. So from our perspective, we're a little bit agnostic of, we like to have a range of foods that our donors are fed. And we have a raw line that was very much like by our customers' demand. And that we maintain. It is harder to get. So if there are people who are feeding raw and want to have their healthy pet contribute to our stool bank, please have them reach out to us. It's always something we have to actively recruit for to keep it going. Those are the main things. And I think just to add that any raw fed donor is a raw fed donor. We do not falsely label things. So there's sort of, that should go without saying. Mm-hmm. There are some rumors that some of our raw fed donors were vegan, and it's just not true. I mean, it's hard to know how to speak to things that are just not true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Holly, talk to some of the data around like what % of donor applicants actually
Why don't you just do?
Okay. Yeah. So Holly presented some data at ECVIM earlier this year on how do you run a stool bank. And so that encouraged us to go in and look at like, okay, how many, because what we do is we recruit healthy pets, and then they go through this screening process that Holly described. And this year we have about 2,000 applicants. So these are people who say their pets are healthy. Mm-hmm. And what we learned through that process is that their definition, we called it apparently healthy. Because when they go through the process, they really aren't to our standard healthy. And so only about 2 to 3% of apparently healthy pets actually make it through the process to become donors. And so
for our stool bank.
For our stool bank. And
I can tell you that like the little limited knowledge I have of there's a company in Texas. I think it's just through veterinarians. And then there's another company. Neither of them are testing to our standards, which is a bit of my point of doing this. We're publishing a paper. So this is how frequently you need to test to avoid transmitting parasites and pathogens to your patients.
Right. So today we have about, call it 85, 90 donors.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you do the math,
yeah,
we had to screen a lot of pets to get to that 90.
Mm-hmm. Which is really expensive too.
Exactly.
The screening itself, I mean, and it's so time consuming
But it's kind of like we're running a blood bank, right? Like we do not want to be transmitting a parasite or pathogen to a sick pet. Like that's the last thing that they need.
Right. And so, so one of the things that we did realize, so early on, Holly mentioned that we had customers who were asking for raw fed donors, and we're in the Bay Area. So we recruited raw fed donors in the Bay Area. One of the things we found is that not just raw fed, but donors do not stay in the program very long. Mm-hmm. Generally, like we have some long lived ones, but generally it's about 6 to 9 months.
Oh, wow.
Because what happens is they get exposed to a parasite or pathogen. Mm-hmm. They take antibiotics for one reason or another,
and then they don't come back,
and their microbiomes never recover. They move. They age out. Okay. And so, or they get another pet in the home, and we typically only like to do one pet homes, things like that. And so, so we were finding it really hard to maintain our supply of raw fed donors. Oh, there's another practicality of this. Raw fed pets don't produce as much poop as non-raw fed pets.
Especially cats, actually.
Yeah. And so we were having a really difficult time maintaining our supply. And so I can't remember the years, but I think like in 2019, 2020, we had it as a product, but we just couldn't guarantee a supply. So we took it off the market.
And we still sometimes had it, but it was.
Yeah, I remember that time.
You had to know to ask us for it.
Yeah.
We didn't have enough to put on the website.
Yeah. And so then was it a couple of years ago, sometime during the pandemic, Dr. Roman approached us about having her pet supply supply that need that we could no longer supply. And I don't know how many folks know Dr. Roman, but I think of her as the godmother of fecal transplants. She's been doing them longer than we have. And I think she said
30 years.
Yeah, I think she says she's done over 30 or 40,000 fecal transplants. And she has been breeding standard poodles in her 7-acre property in Massachusetts, and has a whole protocol of how she feeds them, how she cares for them, both sort of as a pet parent, but also as a veterinarian. And it's multi-generational. And so in talking to her, we realized that you're not really going to find many pets in a city like the Bay Area that really be naturally reared. They're exposed to all sorts of things that don't really meet her standards, right? And so we started getting, and she has, I think, 8 dogs, and I think we're getting material from 4 or 5 of them now. And because they still go through our screening process, microbiome, parasite, everything. And so we sort of slotted it into our raw line. And Dr. Roman believes that we should all be much more conscious about how many resources we are consuming to feed our pets. And so she is trying to feed her dogs with more and more vegetable matter, but they are not vegan. They're not vegetarian. They probably, or I would say almost certainly, are getting less protein than a true raw fed dog. But they're raw. Just not as, if you think about a keto diet, which is 80-90% protein and fat, they're not keto by any stretch of the imagination. But their microbiomes are healthy. Yeah. And so what we realized is that there are some people who truly want raw only, and there's some people who want naturally reared material. And naturally reared and raw, raw is this big umbrella, and naturally reared is a subset of that. And so we're going to ultimately separate products and label them so people know that they're getting raw or naturally reared. In general, since we partnered with Margot 2 years ago, whenever that was, everything that we sold as raw has been her material.
Mm-hmm.
Through yeah,
Everything
we have some other raw donors, but that
but they're less. Yeah,
they're just going to retail.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we have a small number of retail partners that get just a pure raw. So basically, we're now going to offer raw and naturally reared and conventionally fed pets. Really, only dogs, not cats.
Yeah.
And
what's the difference between, the test results or the microbiome of animals that are raw fed with fiber and those that are on like a prey model diet? Because I remember I had a really good donor dog who unfortunately passed away, and then I tried to recruit another one who on paper looked perfect, grew up out in the boonies, no vaccines, perfect. And he was on a prey model diet, and I had tested his microbiome through you guys, and you said he would not qualify as a donor for you, which was a bit of a shock to me, but I had already seen that whenever I was using him for fecal transplants, I did not get the same results as with the previous donor dog that I had. So, what's kind of the difference? Because, we have both camps, only raw, only meat and, animal material, and others who say, go the other direction. So what do you see in the test results?
Definitely. They need to have some fiber in their diet. And so if you go prey model, what can be lacking, and this is something like Casey from SF Raw talks a lot about, is that if you're thinking about whole carcass nutrition, right, there is fiber in the carcass, right? Mm-hmm. And there's fur, there's feathers, right? There's, tendons. They're more difficult to digest parts of the animal that are not typically being given in sort of the prey model. Some typical, like if you approaches to prey model diets, and we can see that in the microbiome because the anaerobic bacteria in the gut that are further down in the large intestine aren't getting the food that they need to grow, and so their numbers are low, and we can see that signal. And usually it's not that hard to address by adding some fiber to the diet, but not everybody, I guess, wants to change their pet's diet.
Yeah. And just another plug, that's where the green Juju product can really come in handy, right? So if you're feeding prey model and you add a little bit of that fiber, then you're able to, we think, drive a healthier microbiome.
And what's nice is the green Juju product is a real food, right? It's not a processed, fiber. It's actually plants.
Right. Yeah. And in nature, they would eat, things that they pick up, or they eat some of the digestive content of their prey, for sure. So, yeah.
That's right. I used to work on, wildlife disease and studied a lot of dead zebras, and the jackals, they go for the intestinal contents first.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, again, we need to be flexible, and that's where the research that you guys are doing and from all the tests that you're going through, because the list of questions that you ask just to run the test are incredible, and obviously all of it has to do with diet and such as well. So again, it's the research that is going to show us more and give us more indication. But certainly, as far as I've done a lot of research recently on the microbiome in general and such, and one of the things that I realized in the process was that we're at the very, very bottom of really learning all the things that need to be learned. So microbiome research is really in its infancy, and you guys are contributing greatly in creating a better platform with how to do it, because a lot of the studies that I found on feed were done on 3 dogs or 10 dogs. I'm like, well, that's not going to give you any information. And they also didn't do it right, in the sense that they only had the animals on the diet for 2 weeks, and then they tested the microbiome where it takes longer. after a switch in diet for the microbiome to balance out and then be more accurate. So, we're really in it. I want to make that point too, that even though we have learned a lot about the microbiome and we're doing a lot with it, we're still in our infancy, basically.
I think we might be a toddler now.
Oh,
Yeah.
the 800 or 1,000, studies coming out every week.
Yeah.
Like that, maybe we are definitely progressing fast, but trying to keep up with that is very difficult, because even if the information may be out there, we also have to be aware of that information and be able to kind of collect it. So there's also a massive amount of data that comes with the research, and there are different tests obviously that are being done that give a little more specific answers, but then there are tests that just give you the world of answers or data, and then you have to translate that data into something that's useful. Because we're trying, we're putting the microbiome, then we have the genome of the human, we have a lot of ohms that are being brought together, and that puts a lot of difficulty into really putting it into something that can be useful, because if we have so much data, it's great to know, but what do you do with it? So that's a little bit of part of the difficulty. And just to come back to the challenges of animals healing from one fecal transplant, for example, we also have to have a bit more of a just know a little bit of what it takes to heal, and it's not that simple. Even just 7 or 8 years ago, when I started doing fecal transplants, the animals were healing faster. They were improving faster. They had greater improvements from the fecal transplant than they do now. And sure, now we also have testing, so that may be part of it. And, I can't really say that I've done a study. It's more like an impression that I have. But in general, I think that we can all agree on the animals having a much harder time staying healthy and then getting, to health. And so we need to kind of take that into consideration. And, the efforts that we were putting into our animals' health 10, 20 years ago are not sufficient enough anymore in many cases to get the same results. And so we have to work really hard on health, and it can take several fecal transplants and other things that have to be looked at, such as hormones. What are the structural challenges? I see a lot of things that are related to the nervous system that would need to be addressed to also help, that, for example, cause reflux. So there are so many different things that need to be addressed at the same time to get maximum benefit. And it's not just about fixing the microbiome, although it's a huge part of it, but there are a lot of other things that play a role as well. And even, I just had a chat with Dr. Margot Roman the other day, and she said that oftentimes she will do multiple fecal transplants on an animal and then also send them home with fecal matter to give in between. So it's just, we just to kind of bring the level of expectation to reality, because we learn about all the miracles of the microbiome and such, and it's really amazing, but it takes a lot. It's not the only thing. And you mentioned earlier, I think it was you, Carlton, who mentioned that the immune system can also start attacking the microbiome, because the problem that I see a lot is that in young animals, their microbiome is already out of balance, and we give them metronidazole and all these things. And so their microbiome is so out of balance that then the immune system is not being trained properly. Because in the early times, early in life, that's where the microbes train the immune system to distinguish between healthy and damaging. And so if the microbiome at that point is not healthy enough, it will not train the immune system properly. And since more and more animals, young animals are exposed to, the drugs like metronidazole and antiparasitics. And then, we have the problem of glyphosate that's in the air, the water, the soil, the food they eat. So they already start out with a poor microbiome and a poorly trained immune system, and also a poorly trained nervous system, because that also happens, early in life. And so our animals, when they are born, are already set up really poorly. And because we don't know what happened with mom. So it's like from one generation to another. So basically, as the health is decreasing, the amount that we have to put into actually getting them back to health or greater health is much greater, and it's really difficult. And I feel for everyone out there who has spent a fortune, on trying to get their animals healthier. But yeah. Anyways, I just wanted to kind of bring that up too, because that's a lot of the feedback I'm getting from people is like, oh, I did a microbiome test and I did a fecal transplant. It didn't do anything, or it got worse or something. I'm like, it takes a lot. And I'm more than happy to support people and, getting more answers that way. And I know you guys offer consultations for people when they do the testing, right?
So there's a rule of thumb that I started with here, which was, I don't know what you think about this, Odette, but it was something was suggested to me early on, which is that you need to sort of think about how long has your pet been suffering from this condition, and view it as that their ability to heal from it is going to take time. And the longer they've been dealing with this, the longer it's going to take for them to heal. And there's research that came out of Colorado State's veterinary school showing that the and a poorly trained immune system, the damaged immune system, actually will tag beneficial bacteria in the microbiome and target them for elimination.
Wow.
And there's a really interesting documentary that's coming out called Designer Shit. I don't know if I sent you the info, Odette, but it's about a woman's journey to heal herself from ulcerative colitis, and which is terrible. And she couldn't even do her shopping without having to run to the bathroom and random places. And so she did research on doing FMT for people, and what people, when they're doing it for themselves, I mean, right now there's no way to do it except for yourself, right? Do it yourself. Fecal transplants is terrible. It's 6 months or more that they do it. And sometimes they're doing it daily. Right. And so it's true in terms of infancy or toddlerhood that we still don't know how often to do it, how many times to do it, how long to do it, how long will it take for your pet. And we are still learning. And but we do know that it usually there's some, especially seems like the ones that weren't that sick, right? That their immune systems weren't turning on the body itself. That it can be one and done, but often it takes longer. You have to retrain the immune system. Retraining the immune system probably takes a minimum of 90 days and longer. In the case of Designer Shit, it did work, which is amazing. She wasn't sure at first if it would. And then she ended up getting pregnant a couple years later, and that's actually what ultimately really turned things completely around for her. So it worked, and her doctor was saying that right when you're pregnant, the body turns off some of the signaling it does to protect the fetus, right? So her immune system had been targeting her microbiome. She'd had antibiotic exposure when she was young, and then she just her system never recovered from that. But actually, fecal transplant for several years plus, followed by pregnancy, and she is, but she wasn't sure if it would work. And it's just a case study of one, but it's an interesting documentary that's just coming out now.
Yeah, so get your animals pregnant, right?
Right. That's something you can do with your animal, though, right? So
yeah. Well, I obviously don't recommend that at all. That was a joke.
Well,
but Marco, sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, usually we don't have that option because they're fixed already.
Yeah, and we definitely don't need to contribute to more, animals roaming around freely and suffering. But Margot Roman, she talks about her that she notices a difference when her animals are either pregnant or lactating, that their poop is kind of potentiated. So when she does fecal transplants, that the results are even better than if it's just regular non-pregnant poop. So,
so this is support for that. And the other thing another case that she interviews this guy who had done it himself, and his mother was the donor, and she was going through menopause, and he ended up having menopause symptoms while he was taking fecal transplants from his mother.
Yeah, we have to be careful, and that's why it's so important that they're healthy and that they're not overweight, the donor dogs. But just briefly before we end, because we're coming to like an hour and a half here,
Yeah.
I don't want to let you guys go, but do fecal transplants or the fecal capsules that you have from donors that are kibble fed work as well as the ones from raw fed? And I mean,
yes,
I know you're doing all the testing. So what's the difference in their microbiome?
So for one thing, they're all screened for microbiome composition. So we don't have any donors that don't have a good representation of the core beneficial groups of bacteria that cats and dogs have. And we publish papers on what are the core bacteria that are found in most healthy cats. And the one for dogs is coming out. We've done that research. And so we have that confidence that, like, if we're viewing the donors as a kind of fermenter for good bacteria that these animals need, we know that they have them. Also, I just wanted to reiterate that there are a range of kibbles, and there are so much, I don't want to go into brands, but there are some smaller alternatives that, while we call them kibble fed, much better sourcing. And so, companies that I think people would like better. We just don't want to, we decided early on that getting into too much information about each donor, like, that led people to nitpick every little thing about them. And so it's, like, oh, why do they eat that treat? Or, it's just, we view it better as, like, we're going to screen them, make sure that they have a balanced microbiome. It has all of the right groups of bacteria that we're trying to promote. They're typically young, healthy animals. And so there may be other things besides bacteria, right, in there, hormones and things that we're not testing for. But because, like, Margot was talking about how, like, sometimes older animals will start, like, running around playing when they're having, donations from young animals. So there's other stuff in there that we're not testing, but we do not see a significant difference in the reported benefits of the two. In fact, I think that our donors who are on more of a conventional diet actually tend to have better representation of some of the kinds of bacteria that we're looking for. So it's complicated, I guess, to assess, like, which is better. Ohio State was doing a study last year on comparing our naturally reared material with more conventionally reared, but I have not heard yet the results of that study. But there is an independent research project going on to look at that.
Good. That's awesome.
Yeah, and the way I think about it is that it's a bit more like our decision to eat organic food. And so, like, there have been studies that show that the organic tomato isn't necessarily healthier for you than the non-organic tomato. But I still believe in buying organic tomatoes and eating them because I think it's better for the environment. I think it's better for the workers, and I think it's more sustainable.
And your individual pesticide level is lower.
Right.
And even the nutritional content is the same, right?
Right. And so I view raw or naturally reared products along the same lines, that if you're going through the effort and expense of feeding your pet raw or naturally rearing them, you are more likely to want to have all the products that you give them fit that same kind of ethos. And so that's really what it's about. But we don't see any evidence yet that there's a divergence in the effectiveness.
Yeah, and some of it may also be due to the ability of testing that we currently have. We test for bacteria, but there are fungi, there are viruses, there are, a lot of good metabolic compounds, like the hormones and all of that we don't test for. at this point. So it's really, in the end, it's not really a complete picture. It's just the best that we can do at this time with the data and the testing that's available, because I know that further testing will probably become available at some point, but right now it's still quite expensive. So there's that as well, that we're looking at expense. So the more we want to know, the more expensive it's going to become, and so we need to also keep it at a level that's still affordable for people.
Yeah, and that's one of the promises of like what we're doing for the next generation of probiotics, is that we're sort of taking a fecal transplant and breaking it down and figuring out what's working. And I'm very optimistic about our first products that'll be coming out in a couple of years, but I think what we'll have in 10 years will be even better.
Yeah, because it's growing exponentially. I mean, it's just taken off. It's incredible. Yeah. All right. Anyways, I see there's still a lot of questions on Facebook, and I will get to those. But I wanted to share with you the beautiful Holly and Carlton and their hearts, and give you some answers. And I really hope that it was helpful and illuminating. And I know you guys are really busy, but I'm sure that if people have any questions, that you'd be more than happy to answer those. And maybe we can always come back together with more questions, and maybe do another live and just do the Q&As. I'll just have a look and see what all questions we got, and then we can decide if we just want to hop back on and just do a session where we just answer the questions. In any case, I so appreciate you taking your time, some time out, busy schedules on a Sunday morning to come here and share with us, and your kindness and your heart. I love you both. I love everyone who came and listened in, and also time out of your busy lives, and for all that you do for your animals, and the word that you're spreading, and helping others, and helping us veterinarians and companies to be better. Again, we're all in this together, so thanks for being in this together. I love you all, and have a wonderful rest of your Sunday.
Yeah, thank you, Odette.
Thank you so much, Odette.
Yeah, great talking to you.
Yes.
Yeah, same here. You too. Bye-bye.